Gonna be honest, the main way I remembered the events of Alliance of the Illusionary Eyes, the main selling point of the Plus disc to most people, is via misremembering it as Mirai Fuken. You know, the Karno Kyokai spin-off movie, which is just not accurate. Again, the whole pace breaker thing that was the focus of the last part, link or something up top, had conditioned me to speed read something fierce, meaning as it went in one eyeball out the other, I retained nothing. And of course, it didn't help that this story and Mirai Fuken aren't exactly coy about all their shared plot elements. Admittedly though, it is kind of funny to see Karno Kyokai steal a Tsukihime premise for once. Even if it does mangle it. Yeah, see, after note-taking and really getting into the minutiae of this story, I came away realizing my preconceived notions were incredibly unfair because there is a drastic difference between the two. That being Mirai Fuken does away with nearly everything good about the original premise, and doesn't add much to supplement that fact despite having substantially more runtime. This is definitely a tangent to be expanded upon whenever the heck I go back to finish that K&K series, but Alliance of the Illusionary Eyes is the better experience, even with the pace breakers all busted in blue. Structure being the main reason for that. Despite being a third the length of its spiritual successor, it does substantially more with the building blocks it's given. For example, within AOTIE, both of the protags have special eyes, same as in Mirai Fuken. One sees visions of the future, the other visions of the past. That dichotomy and how their abilities affect their respective outlooks on life ties seamlessly into the overall moral. Even if the future is terrifying sometimes, it's better to fight to change that than drown in the murky mire of the past. It's simple and clean. Makes me wish Nasu wouldn't walk away when he hears me say, please, write more short-form things. Mirai Fuken takes the same basic premise and shuffles the names of the characters around and gives them both eyes that see the future. Which, you know, kind of flies in the face of the messaging of the plot. Not to mention, Mirai Fuken also plays into Nasu's proclivity to write stupidly long, meandering things that really overcomplicate what is in reality very basic. I know this will probably be a hot take, especially coming from a Sachin appreciator, but Tsukihime was saved by deadlines. Originally, Nasu wanted each route to be 30 days instead of 11, which is an obscene number of days, and as Takeuchi said in a few interviews, maybe I'll put it on screen if I'm feeling ritzy, probably not, that was just unfeasible. You don't even have that much content to write about. There's not enough you could put into 30 days that you could not compact into those short, sweet routes. But it's kind of clear in what he'd write later on that, at least for the time, he wished he had those 30-day routes for a while. Maybe one day I'll tackle the specifics of that, but that's a whole ass Fate video, and I don't know if I have that in me. Let me know in the comments if you want to see that. I may not have it in me, but fucking viewer engagement will drag it out of me, because I am a shallow whore. The point is, Mirai Fuken is the incredibly bloated version of this story. Why it's kinda cringe is a topic I'll cover actually soon. Subscribe please. To scroll back, Alliance of the Illusionary Eyes, notes and all, took me about an hour and a half to read. I take a lot of notes, so in all honesty that probably ratios out to about 45 minutes depending on reading speed. That one Shakespeare quote is extremely dumb, but the brevity of this work really is what makes it strong. See, because of its runtime, the characters have to be established in a gung-ho way that Nasu hasn't really ever done before or since to my knowledge. What I mean is, instead of the reader being slowly spoon-fed all the details of a certain character, a lot of the stuff here is left to inference, which I honestly rather appreciate. Akira is easily the most adorable character in this series, and her meekish freakout in the beginning while still trying her best to do something helpful immediately sells her for me. It's weird as heck to see someone yelling, "Please don't murder," in the middle of a street, and the narrative calls attention to how even she herself knows that, but she does it anyways because it's what she thinks is right. Her being nervous clues us into one thing. Akira is a normal person outside of being able to see the future sometimes. It does wonders to the setting to see how someone who, you know, isn't traumatized reacts to Tsukihime's world. Wow, I wish we had a character like that in the original Suki who was the focus of a route or something. Sounds like it could go a long way towards contextualizing that crazy world, especially considering how much Akira's brief appearance does wonders for that here. Oh well, shame, I guess. Oh. Anywho, Akira is characterized not only by her actions, but her design, which, well, what a fit. Very, very Christmassy. I love this. I know this is nostalgic longing for an era I was literally babbling during the time of, but I really like this age of Takeuchi's art. It just has some kind of magic to it. It's still got that 90s anime inspiration mixed in, but it takes those inspirations in a wholly new direction. It's not as janky as his earlier work, nor as homogenous as his future work. I've had this art book, the Tsukihime Plus period art book, for ages now, and I never get tired of flipping through this thing. That isn't to say modern Takeuchi art is bad or anything, mind you, far from it. I just think it's too incestuous at this point. By which I mean he's fallen out of needing inspiration to make something. He wholly has his own style now and is the person who inspires new artists to make stuff, which is a wonderful little cycle, but personally, I'm always going to prefer this rougher work. I know nothing of art terminology or, f***ing theory or whatnot. I'm a righty person, but this artwork speaks to me as an aspiring maker of things. But it's better not to be stuck in the past, I suppose. New things will always be coming out, and it's not like that era of artwork is going anywhere after all. So towards the future is probably better. After all, one look at what playing in the muck does to fake Shiki, whom I will now be calling Nisei because typing out fake Shiki more than twice is already too much already, is evocative of what playing in the mire of the past leads to. I've written out about 3 different ways to describe this dude, and I keep finding that the simplest way to do it is bro read Tsukihime and thought it was real, lol. Like, no joke, that is his story. He gets a little peek into Tonoshiki's head, gets trauma from it, and decides that violence is how to make progress in his life, because it's through conflict that humans grow. Wait a second. Nisei gets fixated on Shiki's past and wants to replicate it because Shiki is a happy, fulfilled person now. See, instead of the conclusion being Shiki struggled against incredible odds to find that little bit of happiness, Nisei's takeaway is that Shiki went all murder, so he do same. Easy as that. That's how happy. In other words, because he's staying there trapped in his mindset, he can never progress towards anything other than degeneration, which is reflected in his actions of love-bombing Akira, gaslighting her on multiple occasions, and taking advantage of her goodwill. Where she is hopeful, though a bit naive, he is a conniving fox who will do whatever it takes to get what he views as fulfillment. They're polar opposites, and this is a story where their ideologies get to clash heads. Where this really gets interesting is in the utilization of flipping perspectives, something Nasu had played with a bit in the original Tsukihime. The CL route comes to mind, but he seems utterly enamored with this time around as the whole story is built upon that literary device. While that wouldn't be how he solely writes going forward, Nasu certainly would not shy away from this technique in his next work. Especially in his next work. Honestly, thinking about it like that, the Plus disc was a testing bed for Fate in more regards than just the engine. More than just literary quirks and engine shenanigans though, it can also be felt in the sound design. Type Moon has the ability to do more than one sound effect at a time with this engine, and they are f***ing using it. It's honestly kinda distracting, particularly because the sound effects are all from the same sound library as Tsukihime. Those short clips that chop on and off when they repeat. This is only really noticeable during the cafe sections where the idle chatter sound effect is playing in combo with the silverware and both are just choppily coming in and out. But still, it's nothing disastrous, mind you, and as I said in the last part, sound design really does add to a story, but it's something I'm glad was fixed in Fate Stay Night. But other than just sound effects, there is utilization of actual composed music. No more MIDI BGMs, this disc is rocking the Ever After OST. something which I hate in Tsukihime itself, but don't mistake that disdain for me disliking the tracks on their face value. Cause, wow, crazy thought here, I know, but it works really well in the thing it was made for. These tracks aren't bad, they're like fine and good in this, and on their own is like a little remix thing. Particularly the version of track 1 that plays when Akira talks to Akiha, that's not gonna get annoying, on the phone fits the laid back tone of that scene really well. Total side note, but I like when Akira slams the phone after Shiki asks, "What do you mean?" and she screams, "Thank God he understood." Just good moment. God, I'm so off topic. Oh well, it happens sometimes. Anyhow, what I was actually talking about, the perspective shifting from one character to another, is a literary technique Nasu f***ing loves to use. And though it has seeds in Tsukihime, that was just for dramatic effect in that work. Where it really has its roots and how it would be used hereafter is right here in AOTIE. We're cut off of certain chains of thought that would allow us to solve what's going on plot-wise without much issue. Because it's flipping back and forth, we, the audience, are not clued into everything, which, in my opinion, makes for very engaging storytelling. A notable example is in the first cafe scene where Nisei compares Akira to a small animal in a very suspect way, and before he can start detailing how he's presumably going to be her Discord mod or something, we're snapped into Akira's perspective, who's just happy to have some help to solve these terrible murders. Because Akira is just so hopeful and thinks Nisei looks like a puppy, it obfuscates the suspect nature of his perspective. What he says in his initial scene is a red flag for sure, but not one someone might pick up on immediately. There is one more thing one might call into question though, and that's this guy's age. 21. It's still odd, especially considering Akira's in like fucking middle school, but you have to take into account two things. 1. This dude says he's Tonoshiki, and let's be honest, that's pretty on brand for him. 2nd though, it's not clear when this story takes place. The only thing the reader knows is that it's set after Tsukihime. Whether that's a few months or a few years is entirely unclear, and furthermore, as of when the Plus disc was released, there was no official design for Shiki, so hell, this could have been his design for all readers at the time knew. That contextualization is something that's lost to the march of time, but I still think it's good to keep in mind for the setup of this story. Sure, we, 20 years after the fact, know what Tonoshiki looks like, but no one did outside of that goofy-ass blue shirt when this thing came out. Therefore, it'd be totally plausible to readers at the time that this discount Mikia Kokuto-looking motherfucker could have been an older Shiki. It's still definitely suspect, though. Also, I'm sure that some readers probably saw through this for what it was immediately, because this dude, Nisei, acts kinda different than Shiki. Different in a way that a few years of growing wouldn't make him do. Our Shiki would have to be asked his name, he wouldn't just hand that out willy-nilly. He's dumb, he's not polite, he was raised like a fucking bumpkin. He also wouldn't eat an entire cake slice in one bite like a lunatic, seriously. Stabbing a cake, eating it in one bite, what kind of fucking evil person are you? Most tellingly though, when you start any route in Tsukihime, Shiki is a perpetual poor boy because he refuses to ask Akiha for money, and she won't let him work part-time. There's no way he can afford to eat at a fancy cafe every day because he's never leaving the Tono household, let's be real. Akiha's gonna have that dude chained up for the rest of his life, which kinda hot, honestly. I'd argue that in a story like this where there's an air of mystery to what's going on, this is the best way to do it. Structuring a story with context clues like this creates a nice dichotomy where the reader has to make evaluations for themselves. Or not. Even if a reader isn't the thinking type, they can still get the experience of a reveal at the end. That this Shiki isn't actually Shiki and instead a prey mantis-looking gremlin can be a twist or a satisfying confirmation of a theory depending on the type of reader someone is. What's important is with how this is written, both readers in this scenario get their time respected. The reveal isn't so obvious as to bash readers over the head with it, nor is it as opaque to feel like an ass pull at the end. it's written just right. And in writing, that's a surprisingly hard thing to do. After all, the author knows everything about their own story. You have to respect your audience enough as an author to not baby them. In writing, the goal is usually not to give a 5-star tour of the world, but to give a little peek into it with enough context clues that it feels real. You have to trust that your readers will get it, which thankfully, most do. Of course, you'll have people who complain about the story regardless, but you have people who complain about anything, and those people are never worth the time of day. Long tangent that kind of went off topic at the end. Short, this literary technique of switching perspectives is one I'm rather fond of, and I'm glad Nasu played around with it so much here, because it's used very well in a small indie work he'd write called Fate. Honestly, those perspective shifts in Fate's Stay Night are kind of the best parts of the novel. I don't really look forward to reading anything else except those. But hey, maybe I'm misremembering. 2 years does a lot to jade a motherfucker. But regardless of the work they're in, those shifts make the world not feel so damn insular. Though, of course, switching perspectives isn't the only way to do that. Some other ways of making the world feel more lived in are the artificial feeling self-reference and the less artificial, unlikely character interactions. I say artificial, but that's not always a bad thing. For example, in AOTIE, I like the name-dropping of things like Asagami Academy and Akiya's roomies that we get to see later in Kagetsu Toya. Actual quality of that fucking side story be damned. Ugh. One day. I love Tsukihime, but it sure as hell has a big case of the world feeling unpopulated, which of course works for the far side routes, but the near side routes suffer from no one really being around except generic ghoul number 2. Little nods like this, and even more so the pairing of Akiya and Akira, god that's so annoying. Akira in particular being someone not affiliated with anything Tono, makes both the characters and the world have more depth. It does wonders for making Akiya feel like a character outside of her relation to Shiki, which makes me go back to Tsukihime and just appreciate the little proclivities of her more. Because of this plus disc, your appreciation of the characters goes up. It's crazy. It's not something that comes out years later and fucking just ruins your appreciation for a work. It doesn't spit in the face of it. No, it's just like a nice little piece of... I'm not spurned. But speaking of Shiki, kind of, I went off on another fucking tangent again. He only shows up right at the end. And speaking of this work, just improving characters that are in the original Tsukihime, even though it's just Akiya and Shiki, it's really cool to be outside of Shiki's head for once. Taking a look at him from the outside, Shiki really is just some ordinary guy with the voice of an angel apparently, who's only in this story because CL was giving him weird looks when people started dying again, which, yeah, really shows the kind of person he is. He'll only get involved if it's something related to him or someone he knows. Shiki does not go out of his way to help people. He has goodwill, but he has to be probed to act on it no matter what it is or how dire things are. See, had Akira come into contact with actual Shiki, he'd probably just grumble a bit before solving things that night so it wouldn't bother him anymore, and so that he could help Akira, because she asked. What a guy, but hear me out. What a guy. The glow up on this dude is insane. Not to say the blue shirt was a piece of garbage, even though it was, but he just looks so cool now. Confident stance and a relaxed demeanor that makes him appear truly content when things are settled. I love this design. It's only got 3 sprites, but it's so expressive, and on a kind of related note, I gotta say, the look of the new Mystic Eyes and K&K and the remake is great and all, but I will die on the hill that these snake-like, unnatural-looking ones are better. The light changes in color and the unhuman look to them just makes it so clear that you are in danger if you're seeing them. Something I don't think the newer ones convey nearly as well. Less depth and more just a power. Now, that being said, there is something to say about how the newer ones show the impact on the user, specifically when animated. These things look painful to activate. Shows off what the user probably experiences when they're able to see the frail seams that hold together the world. Looks aside, however, how Shiki clears up and concludes this tale with his presence is really well handled. Shiki's experiences have put him through hell, but in this tale of past and future, he's the present. His past informs how he is now, and because of that, he knows the future is on its way, that the future can be better. It's a surprisingly mature outlook, and when he talks, you can see why people like him so much. He leans on being a Gary Stu and outside of his head, and hell, not knowing anything about Tsukihime, one would assume that he is based off of this, but he isn't. Because this is an after story, we know how his head works and how he struggled to get where he is. From his enlightened position, he's able to look at people like Nisei and offer words that they need to hear.
You should kill yourself now!
I really like what he says. Nothing is more pathetic than just giving up and pushing the burden onto other people. If you feel like life is worthless, then just stop. But the thing is, life is always worth living. The present and the uncertain future can come together to overcome a turbulent past filled with awful things. Instead of, the past being the thing that informs the future, which never leads to good things. The past is meant to inform the present, but the present is meant to inform the future, because that's the only way you can make progress. That is a beautiful message. It's simple, it's elegant, and it makes me want to live life the best I can when I think about it. That's more or less Alliance of the Illusionary Eyes, though. It's a very simple tale, and it's told pretty well. I enjoyed actually reading it for once instead of speed reading, but much like the moral of this tale is to keep moving towards the future, we'll have to do the same because this is part 2 of 3. I didn't really think I'd have this much to say about this disc, but hey, what can you do? More content is always fun anyways, IMO. Seeing as it's the 21st as I type this, happy holidays everyone. I hope you're all doing well. If you're feeling in the giving spirit, check out my Patreon. Like the video and subscribe, please. See you soon. Good night, everyone.